She lives in between the pinks and yellows of the world, where a beautiful color is unknown to others, and when she speaks, I become a bee enthralled in a field of daisies. Guys, this book was so cute. Today we're talking about Picking Daisies on Sundays by Liana Cincotti, and I loved, just right off the bat, I loved. When I first saw an aesthetic video of this book, I knew I had to read it, especially because it literally has every trope I love. It is friends to lovers, it is second chance romance, and it is fake dating. Our main character, Daniela, or sometimes she's called Danny, Daisy, it's her middle name, which also she goes by Maria, is a fashion student at university who 4 years ago kind of had a falling out with her best friend Levi, who she was like crazy in love with. They haven't talked in 4 years until they stumble upon each other at a bar. He asks her to be his date to his sister's wedding and to pretend to be his girlfriend so that he can land this job. It's kind of silly, but I was vibing with it, you know, like, yeah. So the whole plot kind of revolves around the wedding and Danny kind of falling in love with Levi again a second time, but not wanting to get hurt like she did the first time when they were in high school. Just a disclaimer before we get too far into this review, this is the self-published edition. That is the book I am reviewing. I think it has been pulled off Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure, but it is getting traditionally published, I think releasing in February. So yeah, that's just an important note to make because it could go through different rounds of editing before it gets traditionally published. So this is a review on the self-published version if there are like major changes when it gets traditionally published. For the characters, I will say I didn't really feel like really connected to any of them. I think Danny was like a really strong lead. I don't think she was boring by any means, but I just personally did not connect with her as a character. And then we got Levi, who is chef's kiss, top of the book, boyfriend's chart. Like, get you a man who does the things that Levi did for her in this book. Kind of going off of that, I think that the side characters, with the exception of Levi's two younger sisters, Claire and Rhea, I think the side characters kind of just get lost in the shuffle. And Danny's TA, Ethan. I think that the two younger sisters and Ethan are the three side characters that kind of like stood out and had personalities of their own, but everybody else kind of was just a name thrown to paper, which I hate to say because I feel like Danny's two best friends have a lot of page time, but I really could not tell you anything about them if I'm being completely honest. I feel so bad saying that, but they just weren't memorable to me. What I liked about this book was definitely the aesthetic. It is definitely like spring vibes, very flowery, floral. Flowery is not a word. You know, pinks and yellows and whites and that whole aesthetic. Like, you can just get that aesthetic from the cover here. Another thing I liked about this book was the yearning. I didn't think we would get any because at the beginning it didn't really feel like a yearny kind of book. But the last like 100 pages are just filled with yearn from both sides, and I was here for it. I also really appreciated how Liana Cincotti didn't just focus on like romance, how there were subplots that felt substantial and there were like other themes going on. Like one theme was about grief that I thought was done really well, and I kind of marked a little paragraph here. My grief didn't disappear after the visit. It never magically disappeared. That's not how grief worked. I didn't leave the cemetery with a smile on my face or closure, but it felt like I'd conquered step one. I was learning how to face the things I couldn't control and how to let them go. How to not only hurt with my whole heart, but how to feel with it and accept those feelings. To not brush off my insecurities and concerns and sadness, but to exist with it and then face it. I was learning. I think she was able to write those side themes that didn't really revolve around romance at all very well and kind of connect them to the story. Danny would never have this realization about grief if she didn't go through whatever she was going through with Levi at the time. Like, it kind of like makes her realize this realization. But that being said, her grief doesn't really have anything to do with Levi, and I really appreciated that, how these characters, at least Levi and Danny, felt very three-dimensional. They both had more going on than just their romance. Now on to the things I didn't like so much. The beginning. I think the beginning is very slow. I was about 100 pages in before I really started to get into it, and that is saying something for a 300-page book. But then on the flip side, once I was into it, I literally couldn't put it down. I finished it in a day. So you win some, you lose some. My only other complaints about this book are things that hopefully will be edited out during the traditional publishing release. There were some sentences that had like repetitive words in them. I did mark one of them, and it kind of just like took me out of the story. It says, my body was riding on this high since submitting my last application last night. And I just think like the last and the last being literally one word apart really just took me out, because I was like last, when it so easily could have been my body was riding on this high since submitting my final application last night. And there are just a lot of those like little issues that would pull me out of the story, but I think when it does get traditionally published, an editor will probably pick up on those and probably will change some of those words. So it's nothing major, and I do think that the story is still really strong and the writing overall is really good. There were just a few things like that pulled me out. And like the repetitive words, there's also a few metaphors that I feel like didn't really fit. I couldn't find the exact quote, but some quote about Levi like picking up he had like two rings on and he was like moving them back and forth. And the metaphor had to do with like figure skaters on ice. I thought the metaphor was beautiful. I just felt like it was oddly placed. This book has nothing to do with ice skating. It's not wintry. It's not even like the vibe of this book. And I think that's what threw me off, was that the metaphor just didn't fit the vibe of the scene. And I think that kind of took me out of it, if that makes any sense. The metaphor wasn't bad. It was a beautiful metaphor. It just very much gave me like Christmassy, wintry vibes. And it kind of like took me out of the scene because that's not the vibes that the scene was giving me originally. Overall, I gave this 3.5 stars because I do think it was really, really cute. I really did enjoy it. I'm so excited to see what comes of this book when it is traditionally published. I'm excited to see like what changes are made, if anything big happens. I don't think any big changes will happen. I think just like those minor sentence by sentence edits, but who knows. And I'm also excited to see what Liana Cincotti does next. I follow her on TikTok and Instagram, and she's such an aesthetic person, and she is such an inspiration as a writer. I also just wanted to mention, I did read the acknowledgements of this book, and she talks a lot in the acknowledgements about like how scary it is to try and how rewarding it is to do. Like, it's very inspirational to me, and so I'm definitely gonna be following Liana Cincotti and everything she does. This was a really good book. I really did enjoy it. I did order her other book. She has a book called, what is it? Don't Be in Love, which takes place in London. This took place in New York City, so different vibes, but I'm excited for that. If you've read this book, let me know about it down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And I guess that's all for today. I will see you next Sunday.